So we're back here with another Feature Friday. It's 2026. Let's get it, Season 3.
And Season 3 is brought to you by the Supporting Black Canadian Communities Initiative, administered by the Black Business Initiative.
And who we have here is a legendary community leader. Mm-hmm. We're going to let her introduce herself.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm honored to be here with both of you. I'm looking into the future, and it looks really good. You guys are amazing doing the work you do. My name is Carolann Wright. I hail from the community of Beechville, the historical Black community, the community of the Black refugees of 1812, very critical history. Looking forward to talking more about that and other work I do. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives and Capacity Building at the Halifax Partnership, and I'm also the Executive Director of the Road to Economic Prosperity. So I'm blessed to be in a position to work with our communities to help build capacity, to have strategic plans, and to assist communities just in terms of building what we want to build and to give us that opportunity.
Yeah, that's dope.
Perfect. Well, thank you. That was a beautiful introduction, and we are just as much as grateful to have you here on this episode today. So you mentioned that you hail from Beechville, and that's your background. Maybe just starting off by telling us a little bit more about your upbringing in community and just walking us through a little bit of that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you might be one of the first folks from Beechville on here.
Wow. Represent. Yes. We're a small community, so we don't get
Mm-hmm.
much representation sometimes. But we're one of the younger communities. The Prestons is older, so it gets, necessarily so. And a lot of recognition because of the history piece, Birchtown, of course, being one of the oldest. And we have such a phenomenal history if you follow the influx of Blacks that have come here since the 1600s. And the refugees of 1812 is a very significant history in terms of how we arrived, why we arrived, and that's a whole history lesson in and of itself. And I get excited about that and could talk for hours, so you guys don't go careful where you go.
You might have to give us a little summary of that
yes.
right before you get into your upbringing.
Yeah,
yes. So I am... depends on which side of the tree you're going on, but 10 generations, African Nova Scotian, connected to a historic Black community. And the Black refugees, and if you read a book, Harvey Imani Whitfield writes Blacks on the Border, and he gives a significant history of Black refugees. And I love his book because it's it's three-dimensional in terms of understanding the historic significance of Black refugees and how they got here. Mm-hmm. And so the War of 1812, in the United States, as we know, slavery was still in full, in full drive. And, the Black refugees fought on the side of the British for British promised them freedom and land. And so refugees were like, well, no, it was a good deal, and took it, right? And so, got here. And this is after the Black loyalists, right? So we're the second. We come after them. And, so we've settled in places like Africville, already established communities like Preston and Beechville. And the interesting part about that, Black refugees, who came with the Black refugees was Richard Preston. If you notice, he's a notable historic figure, was a preacher, but also an abolitionist, right? So that's really significant in Black refugee history. And so settled in the community, and I can probably weave my upbringing into that. Growing up Black community was significant because it gave you roots, bearings, and particularly if you listen to older folks, you got a sense of why you were even there, because I was very inquisitive. So I used to ask, a lot of questions about, how do we get here? Like, what's this about? Loving my community. Because anytime you can go door to door and you see your people every day, that can do nothing but make you give you a strong sense of who you are. And it did. So, I try to pass that along. And though those communities have changed over the years, but I try to give my family that same kind of upbringing and being available, answering questions, and not being afraid to be truthful about the history, right? So that's the context in which I grew up in Beechville. And if there's a Black person who is a Wright, they're 90% related, right? Wright, Niles, Browns, Gross, all those names are connected to our family. So very significant history. And I love the connectedness, not only with my own community, which grew up in Beechville, but my mother's from East Preston. So I have a significant upbringing in significant folks in the Thomases of East Preston. So I claim both of them all the time.
So
because
the Wrights and the Thomases?
Yeah.
And the Wrights are specifically from Beechville? That's like a Beechville last name?
That's a Beechville last name. Shout out to
all the Beechville
the Wrights.
Why did you point? Who's from here?
So this camera right here is for if you want to talk directly to the camera. But most of the conversation is all of us. And then this camera right here, that's all of us.
Okay, cool.
So like there's sometimes where I might say, like let the people know what you're talking about. You know?
Like breaking the fourth wall.
The fourth wall. I love that.
You'll talk right into the soul when you look in that camera.
Lovely. But so that's a brief history in terms of, those are my roots. Very proud of those, always have been. Even when I went to Toronto, I lived in Toronto for 15 years, went in my early 20s, got involved politically up there, cut my teeth on, organizing in another life, as you say, that kind of work where, it's kind of touch and go if you have a job and you're, organizing. So that's what I did for a number of years before coming back home. And I was always homesick. I just loved growing up in the community. That was, as I said, it's significant in terms of your core and who you are and what you believe in. All those things are tested by the folks that you talk to. And I was very blessed to have folks that answered every question that I asked. I was never told to go away. And when I thought about it, I thought, well, I was probably very annoying. I was probably
curious.
Yeah, I was. And they answered every question and they, encouraged me and it was all, positive. People in the community were positive. And it kind of outweighs those folks who can be negative. I never worried about the negative folks because I had so many positive people in my life. And that's what kids have to really concern themselves. Don't concentrate on the folks who are going to give you negative information. Look for those who are going to always encourage you, inspire you, and things like that. And right? That's really important, and push you and and tell you about the good things that you can accomplish. That is critical, right? That is really critical. And it moves forward into when you get into the community itself and you're doing work, you don't want to concentrate on the negative. You want to go to those folks who are doing good work and good people. And you can tell, that intuitively about those folks. And that's really important in Black communities. And that's why we stand. We're very critical of each other at times, but I've noticed that we're still here because we support one another. And in the work that I've been blessed to be part of, the work has gone this far because people encouraged and support and stood. And we have to acknowledge, I don't know why I'm getting emotional, but it's, I think about it at times at this age and think, God, what a blessing, to have people kind of go, okay, if you're going to do this, we got you. But let's get this right. We've been at this for years. And the significance of that, all of that is, we make the mistake of thinking that sometimes that nothing has been done. Look at where we are. This is frustrating, blah, blah, blah. And I take the opposite view. If you know your history, you know that generations have done their work and they said, okay, this is how far we can go. Now you got to take it the next decade. Amen. And you got to take it the next decade. That's how you have to look at this work. Because, you will get frustrated. We are up against, as Black folks being such a small population, and I look at what we have achieved over the decades, it's amazing. If you were to track that in and of itself, we'd be celebrating every day.
Yeah, I think that's really important to touch on, and it goes back to what you were saying about don't worry about the negative folks that are talking about the negativity. Worry about the folks that are talking about positivity. And even though we're critical of each other at times, it's important to focus on what we're getting done. Because there's a lot of different organizations where people are focused on what we're not doing. And it's like, if you're an individual and you feel like we're not doing something, then figure out how to do it. Don't talk about what's not getting done.
Absolutely.
Figure out, have conversations with people and figure out how to, solutions-based problem solving.
Absolutely. And it's not a new concept. And I'm a amateur historian in that even global history of Black folks, you look at what was going on, what goes on over, through the globe. And historically, you look at, I was reading the other day, Malcolm Martin and Malcolm X and all those guys.
Elijah
Muhammad. They all talked, right? And people were trying to divide those guys because of the different philosophical beliefs. And at one time, Martin Luther King and Muhammad Ali came out of a room, and the press was right there ready to, because they had different philosophies. Muhammad was, Muslim, and Martin Luther King being a Christian. And they asked, what were you guys talking about? And, Muhammad Ali being flippant was just like things that bring us together, things that bring us together. And you could see Martin Luther King just smiling, right? Mm-hmm. Because they had philosophical differences, but they knew the ultimate goal was to bring the folks forward to, stop the kind of terrorism that was happening to Black folks at that time. That was the ultimate goal, right? So I love reading those because those are inspiring to me still. And if you look here locally at the folks whose shoulders I stand on and beside, there were folks that do that. And we tend to forget about that. We'll kind of look critically at, well, that didn't happen. They didn't it wasn't their job to get it all done. This is a continuing process, right? And I'm not saying it's not for me, it's not a struggle. It's work. It's good work. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a struggle. Right? It gets frustrating one times. I won't lie. There's times when I'm like, okay, do I have to use hands here? Like, what's happening? You're messing with my folks, right? Yeah. But when I see folks like you two, not just because I'm here, I think that's my responsibility. As they thought it was their responsibility. I remember mentors like Rocky and Joan Jones. Those are my mentors. I'm always happy to have the occasion to mention their names. You have to mention their names.
Yes, 100%.
You've got to mention their names,
you
right?
can't forget about them. What they say, a person dies twice, when they die and then when the last time a person mentions their name. And
brilliant.
I was going to bring Rocky Jones up when you said people that stand by you and people whose shoulders you stand on. And Rocky Jones was a big pillar and accomplished a lot of things in terms of like the Transition Year program.
Absolutely.
It wouldn't be where I'm at if it wasn't for that program.
Absolutely. And I went to the program as well.
Respect.
And I think it's really important that we understand how generations move, right? And my colleagues and I were talking one time, I thought we were kind of on on ourselves saying, have we done a really good job? We don't see any young people at that particular time. That was about 10 years ago. We didn't see any young people moving forward. And the ones that we did see were very critical, right? And it's okay to be critical. I don't want to say that you can't ever say anything against the grain. But having a constructive critique is really important. So it's different from just, downing folk, and being negative. And all we saw was that. It was like, they didn't know the history. It's okay to do that once you know the history. You can tear it apart. You can say, this is what we could have done better. But you build on that, as we did, right? But we had mentors that used to go, okay, you need to go here and do this and blah, blah. And we went because we knew we had their confidence, right? And that's really how this gets passed on is, young folks coming in and asking questions, and you guys will have better ideas. You'll have a different way of knowing, and that different way of knowing is really, really critical and important. And because you can't solve historical problems, with the same information you had historically. It comes with new information, new ways of doing, new ways of knowing. And listening and learning and reading, it is critical to find the information in the archives about where we were, how we were, and how we want to be. That's the only way that you can change your perspective. And, for me being in this life, in this way, and having experience, I don't regret anything, and I've made mistakes, and made mistakes, but always were like, okay, I can recover from this, and this is what I have to do, and not beat myself out a bit because I had folks, who would lift me up as well. Parents and grandparents who were always very positive and told me I was somebody. They told me that without saying you are somebody. They told me that. They knew really important as a young Black woman to make me feel significant, and they did that, right? And I will always thank them for it. And as I said, that piece about understanding where you are in the context of your community is one thing which I got from my parents, my grandparents, and and all that. Okay, here's the context of community and why this is important. Because I came home complaining to my grandfather one time, coming home from a community meeting with my peers and just being frustrated. And he looked at me and said, "This is not about you. No, we're not doing this. You're not coming home and." You got to figure this out. And so what is it, as you said, and you brilliantly said, you got to figure out what it is that you want to do. So how would you do this differently? So what do you want to do? So you're going to complain. What are you doing about it? And it snapped me. I never did it again. It was just like, okay, I know I have to interact.
It's easy to complain about things that are outside of ourselves, or like things that were happened in history, and then or condemn it or criticize it, versus like doing the work that needs to be done to change it. And if we don't know, we can't get mad and like fight the wall. We got to ask the questions and talk to each other and be like, okay, well, what do we think is going to work? What do we think is going to allow us to move forward?
Absolutely.
And a lot of what I feel like is like, sometimes we need to go by ourselves, learn about who we are, who we want to be, and how we're going to take it. But then also we don't come together enough as like a Beechville, as a North Preston, as a different community, so we can all come together with these different ideas. But it also is to say other communities inspire other communities.
Yes.
Because like if you look at what's going on in Hammond's Plains right now, all that economic development, that's going to trickle over to all of our communities.
Right.
And we're going to be like, oh, they're doing great, I want to do that, or come show us the way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And I think they're setting a good stage so that they will be able to come to different communities and be like, this is how you buy up the land. This is how you build in the land. This is how you make it profitable. This is how you make it prosperous.
Absolutely. And that's the way we have to look at when we see good work, is to be able to build on that and support it.
Versus like hating on it or saying like, oh, they're doing it the wrong way. It's like, they're doing something. You know,
they're doing
so
something. And it goes back to the work that I do, right? And so nice segue into that.
Yes.
That's right.
And so, so the work that we did comes from the community. Like, you know, when I say we, I'm talking about the Road to Economic Prosperity had a 5-year plan that started in 2020 and went to 2025. And that plan was to look at the communities economically. And Upper Hammond's Plains was involved in that. And Lucasville, all the communities were involved in that. So we have a 30-member council that has an elder council, a youth council, and an advisory. And people from all those communities are involved.
Wow.
And what we do is create strategic plans for communities and neighborhoods, because we know everybody doesn't live in communities, but we know Black folks live in neighborhoods as well. What are those kind of things that save neighborhoods? So what we do is create a community plan, which then becomes a staff report for HRM, and that work gets put into a queue, which means that communities don't have to come every year, complain about this, complain that. You already have legitimate and a credential process, which is supported by planners, right? And it's the first of its kind. It's called the Economic Prosperity Plan, and it's the first of its kind in Nova Scotia, and I think in Canada. There has been no Black economic plan ever.
Wow.
And so, again, this wasn't new. It was something, when you do the research, that has been identified since the 80s.
Something that we needed.
Yeah, something that we needed. And so when I did the research to see, you know, what's out there before we put this plan together, 1982-83, BUF, Black United Front, which is a historic organization, had put together this brilliant timeline. And we had already done ours, and I looked at it, it was like, wow, all these issues that we have put in this plan have already been identified by BUF. And economic development was one of the main pieces. And they had given timelines and everything, like, you know, those kind of things. And I thought, man, you know, this is just, like, I just couldn't help it. It keeps me up at night because I'm like, this is something. We're still
dealing with the same stuff.
Well, that thing that I said earlier, the thing that I talked about earlier was the fact that it was our turn to kind of lift this work and move it forward, right? Because you can easily say, yeah, we're still working on this. But where do we want to go with this? What have we set as our benchmarks? If you don't set benchmarks, and if you don't say, here's where we want to be, then it looks like you're failing. But you got to set some, where do we want to be at this particular time, right?
Yeah, because if you don't know where you've been, looking back at the Black United Front and what they've done, then we don't know where we're going to be going. And like having those benchmarks, I think, are important because, like you said, like if you don't know where you're going, how are you going to get there? You know, having a roadmap.
Yeah. And so, and then collectively, so that's the 80s, the 90s, we looked at 1995 and saw a task force report, which nobody had seen before. And we just happened to be digging, and some of the folks on our council had been in those rooms on those task force, right? And said, well, I think there was a report that was done that said there needed to be a task force and a secretariat to help bring in the community work forward. And when we were looking at how to create an independent organization from this plan, it came up. It's like, wow, they built it as they went, And so folks get confused about the fact that we don't do things haphazardly. There was some intentionality with our forebears, for our ancestors, and those who've gone before us, our mentors. They knew what it was. They've been in this work, right? So, and if you go back further, you can use the AUBA as itself. Now, everybody's not churchgoers, but as you look at that as, the Black print in terms of how Richard Preston and folks organized the churches, because they could have built one church in their community and said, cool, everybody got a church, we're good to go.
Let the people know that don't know what's ABU.
Oh, sorry, African United Baptist Church Association, African United Baptist Church Association, AUBA.
And that's what kind of kept all the communities connected.
Yeah, well, when Richard Preston built churches, he recognized they were in communities. And the significance of churches is not just about religion. It's about spirituality, it's about culture. It was our first places of democracy. They were really the central piece that held communities together. And the fact that we're still here is because of the AUBA.
We talk about that all the time on here. It's like the Black communities, the churches were what connected us like a web.
They were, and they connected us. And then, he built them in every community and then said, okay, how do we make sure that they're all united, right? And I always testify to this, that the fact that I knew of all the communities is my grandmother would take me to the AUBA sessions every year.
That's the same.
Yeah. See, generationally, that's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. That's cultural awareness, the fact that it still, and it's political. And I know people don't like me to say this around churches, but it's very political. The churches were our first champions in all the work that we talk about today. In the rep work that I'm talking about, it's the same thing. They were very instrumental in making sure that they advocated that, because Richard Preston himself, he gets known as a preacher, but he was also an abolitionist, and he built the Abolitionist Society, established that prior to the AUBA, right? So you have that in 54, and I think 32 was the Abolitionist Society. So
the AUBA is an evolution of that, in a sense?
But they were both happening at the same time, because when you look at the history of when slavery was abolished, Richard Preston was here, and as he built in the churches, it's still slavery, because slavery has been abolished till 1832. We're here in 1812, right? So slavery's still happening in Canada, right? So he was working on, he was an abolitionist, so he went to London to talk about, he was a runaway slave from Virginia, just like Frederick Douglass. And he was younger than Frederick Douglass, so that means he was doing it before Frederick Douglass, that whole abolitionist piece. And he was articulate, and he, advocated so that things like education. If you read the letters of and I'm going everywhere, I'm sorry.
No, this is great.
But
this is great.
The letters of the AUBA are phenomenal. If you go to the archives, you can read them. I mean, the penmanship alone is worth seeing them. But the issues that they talk about is quite interesting, because they're talking about education. They're not just talking about everyday, what's going on in church. They're talking about the issues in communities. And so for me, when they came and they brought the ones out for Beechville, I was up all night, right? I was up all night reading, it's like eyes are red in the morning. But it was so phenomenal to see how communities got together. Lucasville and Beechville were together in Upper Hammers Plains on this particular issue, and did this happen, everything. I'm like, wow. And
getting stuff done.
Black lawyer James Johnson, he was the secretary for the AUBA at that particular time as well. So you see all these heavy hitters, taking significant roles in the AUBA and being the officers, but they're also very political, right? Smart, brilliant people. I'm like, if we paid attention to that and saw what they did, it's right there. It's laid out to how we do this, right?
Education is powerful.
Yeah. And they taught, so they went to, so bringing the community together was the really second evolution of, the work in terms of the political work that Richard Preston, Charles Ronan, and a number of other folks did, Septimus Clark. And, you see these people in history and you see their names, you don't really attach the significance, the political significance of these individuals. Richard Preston had a relationship with Joseph Howe. same way that Frederick Douglass had with Lincoln, right? It was those relationships where he was in their ears like, yeah, we're still having a problem here with, rations and things like that. People delivering on promises they made to us when we fought on the side of it. None of that is happening. Mm-hmm. And you read those things, and as hurtful as it is, but you see how people continued to advocate and continued to understand what was going on politically. And another person within the AUBA was Peter McCarroll, who came from Antigua, and he was the secretary at one point as well. But they understood it wasn't because they were come from a ways that people treat them. No, they understood the assignment that was there. They understood how Black folks were being treated, and they became part of the solution. Mm-hmm. But as I said, you guys got to stop me.
There's a lot of history going in there. So let's maybe tap back into like your upbringing. Mm-hmm. So like maybe go back to the earliest times of education for you, like elementary, and then maybe walk us through you and how you became you. Because I really appreciated when you said you had older folks that you asked a lot of questions to, and they gave you a lot of answers. Because there's been times when I was younger and I asked a lot of questions and they'd be like, stop asking all those questions. Or like you say, they shut down and they don't want to go back into those memories. Yeah. So for me, it was kind of like 50-50, where I think it's important for us to have mentors that don't get annoyed with us, that are able to give us the game and the information so that we can grow up and like believe in ourselves, know our history, and know where we came from. Because I used to ask the people and they would not either. If they didn't know, they'll probably be mad that I asked them. So then they'd just be like, what are you asking me that for? Because they didn't know. So they might just be like, stop talking to me about that stuff. But like maybe dive into that for you.
So as I said, for me, it was, so for someone that didn't have the best school experience, because I'm the last generation of the separate schools, right? So there's a film called, the Separate School Act, 1850, I do believe it was instituted. So the Separate School Act, and somebody will probably call in and correct me, but because I'll get some of my figures wrong. Yeah. So we had the Separate School Act in Canada. So people thought Jim Crow and segregation only happened in the States. We had it here as well. Right, the Separate School Act. And so that meant every Black community had to build, if you had over a certain amount of kids, you had to build a school, because white communities did not want Black kids going to their schools. Right?
In the 50s? This is the 50s?
Right. Yeah, this is because, So, I mean, it instituted 1850. I think the last school closed 1964, probably.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'll probably have my numbers a bit wrong. But so Beechville had, and still standing, Beechville had one segregated school. You go to, most communities have them. And when the Separate School Act was abolished, they gave them back to communities for community centers and things like that. Mm-hmm, so that's what people see now. You won't see those separate schools, but that's what they were. They were segregated schools. I remember when our community won the battle for us to go to the integrated school, and my parents that evening told me and my brother, because I'm the oldest. Sorry, I'm the oldest of 9. And so my brother and I were going to be going, and they would set us down and talk to me. We were really small, and what stayed in my head was my mother saying, don't let anything anybody says affect you. That's not who you are. And so I had never heard any kind of slurs and nothing like that before, anything like that before. So I really didn't know what to expect. Yeah. And my dad said, you have our permission if someone calls out your name to take care of that, to deal with it, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool, right? So, which I did, so that was the context of going to elementary school in the 60s, right? That was our context. And it was difficult. But not having that support at home with people who stood up for you, protected you to the best of their ability, all that kind of thing, made a difference, right? And we talk about it. My siblings and I, talk about it quite a bit. And so there's 10 years between myself and my baby sister. And she'll say, well, you guys did so much fighting. We were a breeze when we went. We didn't have to do anything because everybody was, we already
paved the way.
Yeah. We fought the way.
We did, but it was, and I think about it sometimes, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how did I even get an education with all of that? Because you're not only dealing with kids, but you're dealing with their parents and sometimes their teachers. That was not fun, Yeah. And, people don't like to hear that, but that was my reality.
Yeah.
And even with that, having that base at home where I know I could just hang out with my aunt or somebody, and they would just be positive and they would just pour into me everything that they had, and they did that, they did that for me. And that's really important. And somehow we have to manufacture that for the next generation, because if children, and that's old African problem, if a child doesn't feel the warmth of a community, they will burn it down, right? And that's a very true statement. You see how people react to things. It's like, nobody cares anyway, so, why?
The attitudes of the young people.
Yeah. If nobody cares, and I understand that, because I don't know who I would be if I didn't have that. And even being, leaving here for 15 years and going to Toronto, finding community, people were like, are you home or are you away? Because I was home so much, right? But it was a really important stronghold, even with the political work in Toronto. I ran for mayor in 1988.
Okay.
Came second.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
And that was about community, again, because I had such a strong sense of community and such a love for community. When I got there, I went to Regent. Regent was known as, the projects. And, I went there and started organizing and, folks around, political issues and things like that. And it was really a phenomenal experience getting to know. And it was the first time I understood the intersection between the poverty and race, which is clear here. But in Toronto, it was so, it's such a contrast.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I just seen the other day, I guess a famous street or a famous place in Toronto would used to be filled with all kinds of black folks and black businesses and stuff like that.
Yes.
And I seen the picture, I was like, that's in Canada?
Yes.
I was like, what?
All kinds of,
So
because
back in
we forget that that was this, on Underground Railroad times. They came over later. We're the oldest population of people of African descent in Canada is in Nova Scotia. The next is Toronto, right? I think maybe Montreal, then Toronto. I'll get in trouble from Montreal folks.
Historically black.
Yeah, historically black. And so you'll see all kinds of districts which are buried the same way in the States that, in Toronto, they act like, no Indigenous black people lived here, or, historically black communities lived. Lots of
they try to erase the history that had happened.
Yeah.
So back when you were in those times, was it like, okay, you're going door to door? Were you to do the mayor thing?
Yeah.
Was it going door to door, connecting with different folks?
Yeah.
Was it majority black? Was it different?
No, it was different. There were significant black population, but mostly Caribbean and African populations in Regent Park. So it was a bit different. They didn't understand the context of, black Nova Scotians. I was definitely I was an anomaly. Right?
Because they probably love your warmth and your kindness and your attentive listening.
Yeah. Well, you must be American. No. No. And then the other thing was correcting the falsehood that we were not political, right? We were apolitical, and politics only happened when they arrived in Toronto. I was like, I need to raise my hand here. No, that's not the case. We're the reason that you are here, because at some point the Canadian government said they didn't want any more blacks from anywhere, right? So, black folks fought from here,
So what was that experience like for you running for mayor and coming in second place? I'm just like,
So I've always been so whatever role I have, and I've given you a couple of titles, I'm a community organizer. I work on behalf of community. That's my love, right? Because we have always been successful as a collective. And I learned that from Rocky and Joan. Individual careers are great. Go ahead, do what you got to do. But if we want to have some major successes, we've got to do that as a collective. We got to stand by each other, right? No matter what you want to do. If I want to be lawyers, doctors, whatever we want to be, okay, do that. right? But at the end of the day, we've got to support one another in whatever it is. If you want individual accolades, we can't stop you. But those accolades don't mean anything if we haven't achieved some collective success, right? And I strongly believe that, right?
How do you find like the easiest way, or not the easiest way, but like what do you find? What's the way to get people to come together? Like what can you say, like outside of like the one-off conversation that you might have with somebody or encouragement here? How do you really rally the people as like a community leader?
One of the things I find, because I do a lot of facilitation, right? So that's one of my technical skills is facilitation, and I do that with groups. And one of those things is finding a sweet spot in community in terms of what brings us all together, because we vary in terms of everybody has an opinion, right? Everybody has an opinion about something, but where's that sweet spot? And with my own community, we had to do that as well with Beechville. So, and I know I'm going back and forth. I'm probably not answering your questions.
No, these are good.
But so it's really important to understand the folks that you're working with. And so I make it my business, particularly as somebody who's come through, having the parents and grandparents that I have, Rocky and Joan and some other folks, just seeing those guys. Sometimes it's not what they say, it's how they move in community and how they're respectful and how they're humble and how they love community. And, taking up that adage that you have to have an undying love for community. No kidding, you do. You got to love people in the bad times and good, and people get on your nerves. None of that should matter, right? An honest conversation. But finding that sweet spot where folks can agree, and everybody agrees that we need to move forward. It's how we do that is the thing. Half the time, somebody's mad at me, I don't even know until they say, I was mad at you for, well, okay, I hope we're good.
Let's work it out.
And it's that spirit of understanding that you got to be sincere. You got to, because everybody's worried about checking the next person. Check yourself first. Check how you're showing up. How are you showing up in that room? How are you part of that conversation? And in the groups that we work with, that we get strategic, that's the first thing. How and why are you showing up for that work? And in Beechville's case, finding that sweet spot was really important because this is a community that was about to, in 2020, disappear, right? A poaching stamp of some property left, encroaching industrial park, and the community finally got to that place. It's like, do we want to be here? Do we, like our historic civic is important. What do we want to do? And that community fought and worked, and now we're 6 times larger than we were in 2020. Beechville was the first one out the gate in terms of changing community dynamics, and other people saw it, as you said, and went, oh, I think we can do that. Yeah, you can, because if Beechville, the small community, if we can do it, you can do it as well. And so Lucasville's a part of that, Upper Hammers Plains. We're now working with Cherrybrook, Lake Loon Cherrybrook, and East Preston we worked with last year as well. So as communities come, can you imagine the power of everybody having a plan and coming together and talking about that work? That's serious. That's a collective work. That's collective success, right?
Yeah, because the opposite of that is everybody sells their land and then it's not a Black community anymore. Yeah. Like imagine it's like all it takes is someone with a bunch of money that wants to own Cherrybrook to come and be like, hey, you want to sell your house for a little bit more than it's worth?
Yeah.
Oh, and then they're like, peace. And then how do you even preserve that as a Black community if it's not even as, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, imagine if there's not as many Blacks as there is a non-Black. And you're just like, what the?
And that's how that collective mindset helps with that situation. Because like you said, if it was an individual mindset, sold.
Yeah, because what you just described, I imagine like our house is on fire. Now we all got to chuck water on it. And now we all going to build it back.
Okay, so another question that I had. So you mentioned your transition where you went to Toronto for about 10 to 15 years and then you came back home. So maybe just speaking to us, like what that experience was like first off, what you brought from home going to Toronto and then what you brought from Toronto coming back home and have it enriched the way
question,
Yeah.
So going to Toronto was, and I think one of you mentioned it in terms of you got to find yourself sometimes. Like how am I showing up for myself, right? And so I was in my 20s and didn't feel I had a whole lot of traction, went, and, just started to see, a broader perspective of, what Black communities look like and that, they're more than, the folks that I've seen around here. They come from, you see the variance in terms of who we are in the diaspora. That was really important. It also taught me because I was extremely introverted. I'd be in a meeting, I wouldn't open my mouth. I'd be just listening, and because I was used to talking to my family and always asking questions. Yeah. When I got out, I was very quiet, and so.
What got you out of that?
Well, going to meetings and having to defend the fact I'm a Black Nova Scotian and I really need to say something because I'm being misrepresented here, right? And that started the, me talking and getting used to and facilitating. Mm-hmm. So I love to facilitate, so that also helped.
So like participating, you were there, might not have been saying nothing early on, but then it got to a point where like, I can't not say nothing.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So I could not say anything. Like I got mentors and family I got to defend. I can't be doing this, right? And just being very nervous, right? And so that all changed when I started getting involved in community, place like Regent Park, where you saw large numbers of Black folks as well, and started to understand the politics of what was going on. I was organizing the time of police shootings. It was heavy, like during that time in terms of young Black men. And so I was a rally organizer as well, and so got involved that way. And that taught me a lot about just, doing what is necessary and making sure your responsibility is to protect community at the end of the day. It's nothing more complicated than that. I don't have to be an academic to do that. Yeah. I don't have to do anything. My job is to protect, right? And everybody doesn't get that, right? And so if I don't do that, then what happens? That's the question you got to ask yourself, not anybody else. Mm-hmm. If I'm not doing that, what am I doing? What does that say about me if I don't care about what happens to another person of African descent, whether they be here, whether they be there? And so those are kind of questions that happen. I raised my kids there. They began to understand the importance, without me even saying, of community and understanding that. And they tease me to this day because they'll go, we thought these were social events. All these rallies were at Queen's Park and looking for their friends. It's like, wow, what have I done? So my youngest teases me about that all the time. They're like, no, that's what we thought it was. And so they began to understand, this life in its context as well as young Black men. And that was a very scary thing in that time, because I'm raising 3 young Black men, right, in Toronto. That is not for the faint of heart, right? Because they got targets, right? Yeah. So, and working with people who were activists and things like that, and getting involved in that, I learned a whole lot about organizing, how to organize. And, I was involved in, I was employed as a community health opioid worker with Women's Health and Women's Hands. It still stands today. It's a women's health center in Toronto. But that was a political fight, and we ended up, occupying and doing a sit-in for, I think, about 2 weeks. And that place still stands today. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of, is that, because it means a lot to a whole lot of women. Mm-hmm. And when they tried to shut it down, all the women that we had originally interviewed to get some feedback on the health center came and supported us, right? Like, that's what it means to advocate and support. So I'm used to that kind of advocacy. And
then seeing it work out in real time.
Yeah, and seeing it
actually made
it work. And to this day, people still recognize, 3 of us who were the original staff of that. And that's not an ego thing. It's just like, we knew the power of community. Mm-hmm. If we had thought the 3 of us could do it, that's not going to happen. Yeah. But we knew by having women involved in understanding the cause and what was significant about your health, that's the thing.
Education, right? And rallying.
That's right. And so you got to make sure, and you guys, are hitting on key things, those things around education and information, and making sure you're not holding the information so you're the only one that had. No, that's not what that's about.
We talk a lot about gatekeeping and stuff on here.
It's the worst. It's the killer, in terms of it slows up the process. And I used to get in trouble for that when I was little, because when my father used to tell me things which I thought were really enlightening, I would share it with relatives who didn't really appreciate it sometimes. And, And my dad would just laugh, right?
Yeah.
You know,
it's good that he didn't care about that, because there's some people that be like,
no,
oh, don't tell no one what I tell you. But it's like, if you live like an open book, then you create, like sometimes people might not want to tell you nothing, but at least if they know that, they're only going to tell you things that they know you're going to tell, or that you're going to discuss, so that we can progress and get better, you know?
And it's true, your mind opens and you read. And my grandfather used to tell me things about growing up in the community, like where Beechville actually was and things like that. But it was all the oral history piece. You got to listen to folks, I'm telling you. And he used to say, now, go research it. This is what I'm telling you. This is what I know. Go research it. And everything he said was true. He said Beechville was down by the Rotary historically. It went, the miles it went out to Tantallon, out to, and he was right. So when the history was done, he was absolutely accurate, right? But he knew that anecdotally, right?
It's funny you talk about the history. So I've been listening to, there's a lady named Donna Paris. Do you know Donna Paris?
Donna Paris. No, I don't think so.
I'm not sure where she's from, here or Toronto, but she has a podcast. It's called I Am Black Canada.
Oh, okay.
Or I Am Black Canadian. And the podcast is all about Black folks from across Canada. And they talk for similar to this podcast, they talk for about an hour. And you get to learn their whole story.
Yes.
And it's it's so interesting, because some people are political. Some people are went into the Olympics, and you're just man, why didn't I know this stuff? How come we don't know this? We're not taught this stuff in school.
No.
So then it's we got to go install and learn this stuff on our own. Yeah. But for me, it just gives me so much more inspiration, because I'm we out here doing things. We just don't know because no one's telling us.
Yeah.
We are, and I don't want to be cliche, but we are Black excellence when you look at what folks have accomplished in a time when people were trying to hold you back, and they were being held back, discriminated against. And I was so moved by Miss Geraldine, who just passed, Geraldine Browning, who just passed.
God rest her soul.
Yeah, God rest her soul. I think she was in her 90s, but what a fighter. I loved her to pieces. And even, I knew her from Women's Institute in the AUBA, but she was also a fighter in community. You could not go down, you couldn't go to Gibson Woods and mess around. She, nope, that ain't happening. That's a protector, that's a warrior, that's what she did, and that's what it is. And so I take that kind of inspiration from her in terms of that's how you move, And because our communities were so vulnerable historically, when you read, you cannot read that and still feel like it's okay. It's okay for things to happen. No. And I think hearing the stories of my grandfather and those folks in Beechville, I grew up feeling it was necessary for me to do what I could to make sure that the community was right, that it was protected. And, I don't even know how to describe it, but that sense of protection and fighting for a community is so natural, right?
Purpose-driven work. It's a purpose-driven thing that this is the right thing for you to do. This is what you got to do. You've seen it work out for you. So that this is I don't even know how to describe it myself, but it's that God-given work that gives you that push of
it in here, right? And I always, sometimes say, and it sounds egotistical, but sometimes work chooses you, I've been in several different iterations of work, but it all comes back to this. And so, I
can attest to it. Work chose me. This podcast chose me. I didn't choose it. But even think about your journey. Remember when we were talking about that? Yeah. Your own journey. What you just described is the work finds you.
Yeah.
You weren't just being oh, what do I got to do? Is the questions you asked when you were younger. All the information that was given to you. It allowed you to come up, and that's what either helped mold you, but it also motivated you, and then the work that you did do, it evolved into the work that you're doing now. And so maybe you want to touch on you went to Toronto, and then you came back.
Yeah. So I came back, and I came back in 94. And so the first piece of work I got involved in, or one of the pieces of work was Many. I was at the North End Health Center, executive director there. And then on Gottingen Street, and then they were closing the employment center. So we occupied that for 122 days and, kept employment services on Gottingen. So that was another, so I come home and I'm involved right away with the folks, it was full circle, back to it, right? and involved in things at North Branch Community, North Branch Library, which is a political hub. I don't care how you dice that.
So back in those times in '94, the library and the YMCA, the employment center, was that back then there? That was
no, it was a little tailor shop there. So it was a small employment clinic there. So we fought to keep employment services on the street for folks because they were going to move everything to Halifax Trump Center. Like nobody's going to be able to get services
access
there. Housed, So we did a sit-in for 122 days, and then they finally agreed to have employment services on Gaudier and the Y. So that's when that whole thing happened.
So what does a sit-in look like? Thinking back in them 90s.
So it means it means that a group of folks, you sit in, you plan on a daily basis, you constantly talk to, the politicians about that and be strategic. So it's about being strategic around, how to get what you want. And that particular day, Lynn Jones was involved in that. The unions were involved. And I always laugh about this because I love it when the arts folks get involved because they can do some major stuff.
They be doing damage.
Yeah,
you see
listen.
What they just did?
Oh, because I said to somebody, is the arts folks involved? Because this is going to be, if they're involved, yeah. And in Toronto, it was same thing, right? With the art folks involved, you got some effigies of folks, you got pictures, you got paper maches of stuff, and they make their point. Like that's a visual thing, and that's what demonstrating is about. It's a visual thing to demonstrate your political voice, your right to be political, and so that's the thing that's really important about demonstrating. And I said, and somebody said something about demonstrating. I said, I'd be hypocritical. That's all I did in my 20s and 30s was organize rallies. So I'm not saying a word, right? So
yeah, because I was thinking when you said sit in, I was thinking like
it's another form of protest, right? Mostly, you can be out in the street, but depending on like we did with the health center, you sit in because they don't want you to occupy their space, but you're taking that political position of occupying the space until you have the conversation that is needed to have, right?
So is it like something where you're in there during the office hours or like?
Yeah, you're in there during office hours. You're in there, and I think we're the reasons why they got all those glass doors in some of the buildings here now. So it's like you have to buzz 3 times to get in. It's like, you invade those spaces. But sit-ins are those points of political discourse. You're having
peaceful.
It's a peaceful protest, but it's a protest nonetheless. And we occupied there. We slept overnight. We had learning sessions in those things. Rocky and Joan were both heavily involved. Lynn Jones involved. And they become learning spaces. They're just not wreak havoc on the space, but it's to make a point.
Yeah, so it wasn't disrespectful. It was more so like we're coming together. We're going to occupy the space. Yeah, we're going to learn together. We're going to communicate.
Right.
We're going to...
You create opportunities to negotiate. So we did that. Created a negotiating team to make sure that the staff people from HRDC at that particular time or in employment services wouldn't be in trouble because we took over their space and literally kicked them out of this. They had to leave. And... so you have to be really strategic about it. You don't want any loss as a result of that, but you really need to make your point to government. And we did that. And so with the employment center, the critical thing was when the government called the landlord of that space and said, we want you to turn out the lights and turn off the heat. And she wouldn't do it. Yeah, right? So she had understood. We had already talked to her. She's like, you can't get nothing about Rocky.
She understood the assignment.
That's right. Rocky had already had that conversation with her, and that it was, and that's why being strategic is really important.
Yeah, so it's a lot of moving parts. It's like you have to be aware that they might do this, so that we got to be ready for when they do that, and then that's how we're gonna.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
And even with the employment center, with the health center in Toronto. They said, yeah, we'll talk to you once you come out of the building. We're like, really? You think that we're hip to that, So it was a really important conversation. And in that particular time, I was associated with the NDP because I had run with the NDP the year before. After 88, I think 90, I ran with the NDP. So I was associated with the party. The NDP was in power as well, so they were not happy with that. And it's like, I got lectured about Carolann, you're going to risk future employment and blah, blah, blah.
Because that could have give you, that should or could give you leverage in terms of if you're already aligned with them and they're in power. It's like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do for the people.
And that's what I had to, absolutely. Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right.
So sometimes you got to stand on certain stuff, even if it's in a strategic way or not. It's just the goal that you had at hand. And it goes to show, looking back, if it's still existing today, then there was a need for a community, and it's still a need, and they learned that.
And it's a beautiful place. And I just remember just having those conversations, and then having the health minister online who tried to chastise me because I was the key negotiator, trying to chastise me because, well, you ran with the party. I was like, yeah, absolutely, I did for these fundamental rights, right? And that's why we're doing it. So they ended up, as you say, having a center there. So it's I'm proud of the fact that it's still there, but I'm also proud of the process, right? Your process has to be as good as your outcomes.
Yes.
Because some people think, we'll do this and this and get to this outcome, but it doesn't work. It doesn't stay. It's not solid, right? So when we're organizing, and I don't want to do a lecture on organizing, but when you're organizing, that's what's critical. You can't just, holler at the minister and go away. You can't just have a demonstration and go away. These things have to be in sync. They have to be in line. They have to be strategic. Not one thing. Many things have to happen in order for us to realize our rights. Who taught us that? Black refugees. When they came, they marched down because they weren't being recognized and getting the rations that they were supposed to get. They actually reneged on those. And the Black refugees marched down Barrington Street here and said, show our presence. We're going to let you know that we're still here, and here's the issues that are still really important, right? So we have a history of that, all right? That's why all of that is really important.
So then coming back here, you boots on the ground, and then what led to, maybe give us a quick journey of where you were then and to how you got to what you're doing now.
Sheesh. You're asking a lot for this brain to remember the chronological order of things, which I don't. But, what led to this work, and I always don't want everything to be mystical, but it is, right, for me, right? It is that for me. I can't speak to anybody else.
What is it, sorry?
I said it is spiritual for me because, as you said, as I'm talking to you, it just in my head began to roll out is things that have happened in this work, and me coming to terms with what I know to be true. Things come in my path, right? The ancestors are always watching. They just are, and they're always protecting. So going from the health center to different pieces of work, trying a bit of consulting, and then coming to Halifax Partnership, those are the things that led to this work, right? Because I always believe strongly that economics is the key to our success, but how we understand economics is still really critical. Not a Eurocentric idea of economics, but how do we as Black people look at this? What do we value? And another reference to a book called Indigenomics, I think it's Carolann Hilton, talks about that from Aboriginal perspective. And when I read it, I thought, oh my God, this is incredible, because we too, as people of African descent, look at economics in a very different way, in a way that allows us to experience wealth and prosperity. And that's why we named it The Road to Economic Prosperity, because it is about prosperity. It's not just about wealth. It's not about us getting rich and,
Prosperity in general doesn't mean richness. It means everybody comes up together in terms the road for us as a people.
Right. It includes health. It includes justice. It includes all those things that we talk about, right? And justice, in terms of the incarceration rates, in terms of where our young Black men are, it includes all those things, a healthy community. And if you read, as I said, Indigenomics, it includes all that. But the Eurocentric definition of economics that we have, looked at since the 1800s hasn't changed, right? It's always been about the wealthiest nations. We have never been part of that, never included us, right? So I take that a bit further for us to recognize that. And we have created what's called the Wellness Index for African Nova Scotians. And I'll send you guys those documents as well, it's my favorite document, because everything that we thought about and that we understand anecdotally is factual. proven by statistics from, from the Census Bureau, from different pieces of research, it's all there, right? There's a $10,000 wage gap between Black men and white men. Why does that exist? What is going on there? So being able to figure that out is really important. But the wage gap in general is still wide based on our education and experience and things of that nature. So being able to discuss all those things is really important. It's not a blame game. It's an understanding game. Why does it still exist? What's going on there? Is it about race, or is it about our, the population? What brings all these things together?
Trying to figure that out. Is it education? Is it the the geographic, where they're located?
What is that about? And I'm always very intrigued by that, because our statistics gets rolled up into the general statistics, and we really can't pull those things out. So my colleague at the Halifax Partnership is the chief economist for Halifax. And I said, can we pull those things out? He's like, yes. And so we got a team together and worked on that. And we have a wellness index that we will keep up to date every 4 years, right? Yeah. So for me, that's a major piece, that helps you guys in terms of understanding the statistics. It helps other researchers. It helps a whole bunch of things. Those are the kind of tools that we need. And like you pointed out, Upper Hammonds Plains, the fact that they got their strategic plan done and then went and did the, did their work is so amazing, right? Because, land trusts are the thing. We have lost so much land over the generations, but being able to have them, Curtis Wiley and Upper Hammonds Plains Group, which is...
We had them on here.
Yeah.
And that's where we learned a lot of that stuff. And it's just like, wow, the land trust and the land titles, they talked about that stuff on here. And it's it was remarkable to see like Black communities being able to be on the road to prosperity and us be able to see it. Like when I was seeing like the buildings going up in Hammonds Plains, I was just like, this is going to inspire every Black community and the community that's going up. And then it working out is going to just send ripples across communities for us to be like, oh, you thought it was cool to have one cool hosting community? No, you need to work together and build something.
And how do we sustain it, right?
Yes.
And so the land trusts allow you to sustain it. I mean, land trusts have been in the United States for decades, right? And so seeing us being able to create that and actually see it work is an amazing thing, right? So, as I said, I love that work. I love every time communities are able to create things and to lead the work. So our work is just supporting. Our work is the Road to Economic Prosperity is supporting communities, being able to, provide capacity to communities, because sometimes our groups are not, need some work. We need to figure out what's going on inside. Do we need some strength? How are we effective as our, with the groups that we create? And so that's our job, making sure that happens. But, so proud of the groups that do, and, and in the regions. It's not just in HRM. We get calls from the regions to say, we see what's happening. Can you guys come down and do some facilitation? Yeah, we're there, right? So.
Another question, just to speak to some of the work that you're currently doing, anything that you want to highlight? I know there was something exciting that you had mentioned.
As I mentioned, the index for me is exciting. Having communities call and say, we'd like your help to get us started in terms of how we do some of this work. Being able to help build plans for communities throughout the province, right? So that for me, that's extremely exciting. And I love facilitating, love community. So when a group calls, I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
And because our philosophy is we don't go in and tell a community, we don't go to community and say, you need this today and we're going to, no. If you got a group of 10 folks and you decide that you want to do some work, we'll help you kind of formulate the plan.
So is that like individuals in the community or organizations within the community?
So with the Road to Economic Prosperity, we started with communities because, quite honestly, organizations should not run communities because their mandate is very different. Communities should run communities. Okay, so we look for individual community members, and it can be a group, but we take them as individuals because you want to get that unsolicited, you want to get those different opinions. You want to make sure that you have, a bit from everybody.
Like democracy type of thing?
Yeah.
So maybe with that, talk to the people. Give them your elevator pitch of like talk to the community and let them know like if you need us, like give them the call to action, I'll say.
Well, the call to action for the Road to Economic Prosperity is we want to see every community with a community plan. If you need us, we're there, but you have to be ready. And that readiness means that there's 10 or more folks ready to do some work, roll up their sleeves, because it's a planning process. And communities have never come to HRM with plans before. And when you come with a plan that shows power, that shows leader, that the communities are leading their own work. And we will be there 100% to back you up.
Boom. I like that. See, that's what I'm talking about. You appreciate that.
No problem.
So appreciate the work that you do. And
thank you.
I feel like there's so much more that I want to get to know about you. Is there anything that you want to let us know before we come to a close?
Well, that I appreciate you too. When young people call me, I show up, because someone says, I said, because it's really important. And I get excited because it means that I can retire someday and be just asked to do stuff. No, I will probably be always in the work, but just seeing young folks that are interested, even in our opinion, is really important because for me, that's what made all the difference. It made all the difference. So the thing, it isn't even about the work. It's about understanding the generations that have gone on and being able to build some kind of, I don't know if it's a course or workshops that we understand what went before us, because that's the real key. And as you said, when I hear young folks say, I didn't even know that about something that has happened in our history here. That's really important. So I just want you guys to keep on doing what you want to do. It's incredible. You're incredible.
A pleasure having you on here, and thank you for the work that you've done, the collective work that you've done, you do, and continue to do. So,
thank you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure having you on. So, one word checkout.
Yeah, hit it with Hit her with it. She might.
Okay.
She might not know what it is.
Yeah. So, One North End, the pun is intended. We have a one word checkout. So, at the end of every single episode, podcast, even our weekly meetings, we'll have one word that describes maybe how the meeting made us feel, how the podcast episode made you feel, and maybe like a little small explanation as to why you chose that word. And we all have to do it as well, so you won't be the only one.
It's not just you on the hot seat. We all on the hot seat.
Yeah.
It's timely.
Timely. It's a beautiful word. And why'd you choose that word?
The Road to Economic Prosperity has just come from a program of the Halifax Partnership to the Road to Economic Prosperity Secretariat, an independent organization with its own council doing the work that it needs to do. So it's timely that I'm here. I'm glad to be announced on you guys on your podcast.
Congratulations on that too. That's big stuff.
So my word is going to be generational because all the stuff you talked about was coming from different generations. The work that you've done, the work that you keep encouraging us, saying that we're doing all this work, but in real time, it just feels like you were saying the right thing or what we're supposed to be doing. And I think every generation or every people that has that spiritual call or that thing to do the right thing or do what they know they have to do, they should just do it. And I think that happens generational, whether it's like decades or the times, you know what I mean? Like she's from a younger generation than me. You're from a upper generation than me, but it's the work that we're here to do, to be honest, to, what was that you were saying about like, we had to be, we had to have integrity, but I can't remember the word you used, but it's like transparency with who we are and what we're trying to do. I think that's super important. And I find it gets lost because either people have ulterior motives or whatever. They're doing one thing for you when really they're trying to get this from you. So I feel like just being transparent and being open with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, I feel like that is the superpower because it allows you to bring more folks with you versus like if I'm going to not necessarily lie, but I'm not going to tell the full truth. It doesn't allow the people to rally with you because then it's not open. But if I let people know over here, then some way it's going to get over here, even if I don't have access to these people. And then everybody's going to end up coming and rallying. And then we get the job done. If it's a sound idea, and I think you have to have soundboards in order to get a sound idea. Like if I don't pitch my idea to you, then you can't critique it and then it can't get better. And then we can't find the best solution. And I feel like you can't hold the best solution to yourself. No. It's for all of us to come up with the solution.
Yes. Amen. That's powerful.
In my word, I have so many words that I could probably choose from, so I got to narrow it down. But my word's going to be strategic. And the reason I chose that word is actually when I was reading your bio, I remember looking at the word strategic and I'm like, I see that word a lot, but I realized, I was like, I'm so excited for this conversation because I want to understand it better. And through our conversation, I learned about like the importance of having foundation, whether that be historic and ancestors, as well as the foundation of the communities that you grow up on, and moving with intention, like you said, for the sitting in or other initiatives that you have taken part in. So I just feel like moving strategically as well as a collective, like you have been emphasizing. So yeah, strategic is the word that that stuck with me before this episode started, and then after having a way better understanding on that.
So timely, generational, strategic.
Wow.
And I think, you do have to be strategic. So sometimes don't let your whole book out there. You know? But like, you know. But
you guys are brilliant.
Thank you so much for coming on here. And we had to get you on here for another part 2.
Yeah. Love to. Just give me a call.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a wonderful conversation. I learned so much. You probably learned so much. We all learned so much. But y'all already know what to do. Go like, comment, subscribe, follow, share, comment your one-word checkout, and listen to us wherever you listen to your podcast. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to our Feature Friday podcast. And just wanted to make sure that you guys are connected on all platforms. So wherever you're tuning in, maybe even leave us a 5-star review.
If you're watching on YouTube, hit like and subscribe.
And on our social medias as well, you can follow us at ANS Lab or at African Nova Scotian Youth Lab as well on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We got the whole mumble jumble. It'll be in our link tree in our bio.
Don't forget to enter our contest that we have in each episode.
And the way to enter that contest will be sprinkled throughout our episodes, so make sure that you're listening and paying attention.
Each episode may be different, but comment below wherever you are.
And if you don't use social media and you're one of those people, you can even reach out to us by email at anslab@onenorthend.com.
The details are in the episode description.
And last but not least, we want to make sure that we get you guys connected to our resource, our network of resources, the Grapevine newsletter. So to get subscribed, you can check the link in our bio and subscribe yourself. But if you're not that tech savvy, you can also email us at anslab@onenorthend.com and we can get you hooked up.
We'll see you on the next episode.
See you next month.
Let's get it.
Feature Friday. Friday.
What's your favorite thing about Fridays?
That's a good question.
The features.